So I'm going to hand over to Irina because it's Heike Moldenhauer who's now going to speak, and I'm going to share a screen for Heike.
To see if in between I will present her. Heike Moldenhauer has been promoting non-GMO food and non-GMO agriculture in Europe for nearly 30 years. She currently is the Secretary General of ENGA, a European Non-GMO Industry Association. Previously, she has served as a European Union Policy Advisor for VLOG, a German association the German Association Food Without Genetic Engineering. And she was head of the section for GMO policy at Friends of the Earth Germany for almost 17 years, and an active member of the GMO Steering Committee of Friends of the Earth Europe. She will, as soon as she joins us, present on the issues of deregulation, how deregulation is not an option, and focusing on the food sector perspectives of the new GMOs. Heike, you are already here?
Yes, I'm here. Do you hear me?
Yes, perfectly now.
Oh, yes. Wonderful. Excuse me, I have no idea what has happened. So, yeah, I missed my introduction, but
yes,
that doesn't matter. So, the title of my presentation is Deregulation is not an option, a food sector perspective on new GMOs. The first slide, please.
Yes, Heike, we just don't have your video. Your video is not on. But
it is on.
Or we're not seeing.
Just that's not so important. Yeah,
it's not important. I just tell me whenever you want to change slides. So this is your first slide.
So yes. So hopefully everything works now a little bit better. I would like to start with the introduction of the non-GMO sector and the companies I represent. The non-GMO sector is the response to the labeling gap under the current EU GMO legislation. As you may know, that is, it is only feed that is subject to labeling, but not the related food products like milk, meat, and eggs. So therefore, if companies exclude genetically modified feed, they can use a non-GMO label for their products and communicate to consumers that no genetically modified feed has been used in these animal products. This non-GMO label is based on national laws and industry agreements, and we have now 10 European countries where such a non-GMO labeling is possible. I have no idea whether there are products on the Portuguese markets that are very strong with a non-GMO label are Germany, France, and Austria, for example. And my organization, ENGA, European Non-GMO Industry Association, that is newly founded this year, based in Brussels. We have two aims. One is bringing the European non-GMO sector together, that is split up or separated, but we want to act as one voice. And our other main topic is the protection of the non-GMO business in the long term. That is now really important because the EU, in that case, the EU Commission, perhaps member states, perhaps the majority of the European Parliament is going for a deregulation of these new GMOs. Next slide, please. Many thanks. My perspective is the perspective of the food sector. not as of the food sector as such, that does not exist, but I think there is a common ground for the whole food sector. The food sector is responsible and liable for the safety of the products it produces and sells. And it must be highly sensitive to wishes and expectations of consumers. The whole food sector is well aware that a substantial amount of consumers have no demand for GMOs in food. And that is a very stable attitude. For the 25 years, GMOs are on the European markets. So that means, very brief, in the EU, GMOs don't sell. Important for the food sector as well is that it will be this sector that will be confronted with critical inquiries and anger of consumers should it come to a deregulation of new GMOs. It would not be the seed and biotech sector. So it follows. Yes, Lanka, perfect. Next slide, please. It follows that the best option for the food sector is to maintain the current EU GMO legislation for all genome edited products. As you may know, the current legislation has two central pillars. The first is before GMOs enter the market, there is an authorization procedure with an environmental and food safety risk assessment. Both is based on the precautionary principle. And the second pillar are the transparency requirements. That means labeling and traceability for GMOs is necessary for all GMOs on the market. And that means freedom of choice for business operators and for consumers. Important is this freedom of choice for business operators as well. They have to know what is in the products they produce. It starts from the seed sector, goes further to agriculture, then to feed and food producers. So this labeling and traceability requirement is important for the whole the whole manner we are producing food. In our opinion, the current EU GMO legislation is balanced. On the one side, it enables authorization and placing on the market of GMOs, and it enables to avoid them. And what is important to know, there is no ban for GMOs in the EU, not for new GMOs. We have currently an authorization for about 90 GMOs, one for cultivation, the others for import. So I said the best option for the food sector is maintaining the current regulation. Important is that it prevents the food sector from running the risk to sell untested and invisible GMOs. Next slide, please. Yes, I would like to continue with an opinion poll done or commissioned by the Greens end of March this year. It is about the attitude of consumers to labeling of genome edited crops. Some 86 of the respondents who have heard about GMOs want them to be labeled as GMOs. More in Portugal, the figure is 91% want to have labeled GMOs. The question for new GMOs or GMOs produced with new techniques like CRISPR-Cas, there 68% of the respondents who have heard about these new techniques want them to have labeled as GMOs. In Portugal, the number is 63%. Important to know that is that only 40% of all respondents have heard about new GMO techniques. That means there is a very low public awareness that these new GMOs exist. I think one reason for that is that we have these misleading and confusing terms like new breeding techniques or genome editing, or the term of the EU institutions like new genomic techniques, that creates a lot of confusion. If the term would be correct as new GMOs, I think the awareness would be much higher than 40%. And that is, I think, therefore, webinars like the one today are important to be very clear that we are talking about GMOs and new GMOs. The EU Commission, in its so-called study on new genomic techniques, has no clear stance on labeling for these new genomic techniques. They talk about adapting of labeling requirements and traceability requirements. Next slide, please. So what is going on at EU level? It is not the so-called study that is very worrying in terms of deregulation of new GMOs. That are other documents, and one is the Commission's letter to the Portuguese presidency. There is mentioned that so-called policy action is needed on plants derived from targeted mutagenesis and cisgenesis. The term is policy action. What they mean with it is explained with proportionate regulatory oversight for the relevant plant products by, that's another term, adapting the risk assessment and authorization procedures and labeling and traceability requirements. And adapting, that is my translation, would mean deregulation. The criteria for adapting is that is no foreign gene inserted in a crop, and that the risk profile is similar to conventional breeding, or that these crops could, in theory, occur naturally or through random mutagenesis. Then another criterion is that allegedly these new GMOs cannot be distinguished from conventional breeding, and they cannot be detected. If we use this argumentation, then that would mean that nearly all GMOs, new GMOs, would be exempt from deregulation, that ones that have no foreign genes and that are approximately 95% of all genome edited crops with a market orientation so far in the pipeline. Next slide, please. This would mean for the society in general that with a lowering or the abolition of the precautionary principle and the consumer's right to know, it means with abolition of risk assessment and labeling, then we would lose EU political and societal key achievements. For the food sector, or for the society as a whole as well, because we all eat, it would mean a lowering of food safety standards, and for this food sector, it would mean the loss of control over the value chain. The food sector would have no clue anymore what is in the value chains and what is not in the value chains. it would be especially the organic and conventional non-GMO sector that would be really under threat and under threat of destruction, because a non-GMO label has to be reliable. That means it has to be comprehensive and exclude all GMOs and new GMOs, otherwise it's completely senseless. And for the organic sector, one major selling point is the absence of GMOs. And that is completely under stake with the deregulation, and the EU Commission so far has no proposal and no idea how to manage what is called coexistence between GMOs and non-GMOs. And to be absolutely dramatic, a deregulation or such a really comprehensive deregulation would mean the end of non-GMO production and consumption in the EU. Next slide. Yes. We have yesterday launched a so-called retailers resolution with the title European retailers take a strong stand against deregulating new GMOs. For us, it is completely important to have the retailers on our side against deregulation, because they will be the ones who sell food, and they are, what I said, directly confronted with their consumers and the expectations of the consumers, and there is no demand for GMOs in food. So therefore, I would like to quote the main sentences in the resolution. As representatives of key European retailers, we insist that I can't read the text. Lanka, could you see the text and read it?
Yes. As representatives, that text, right?
Yeah, yes, F1. Mm-hmm.
Of course. As representatives of key European retailers, we insist that the existing EU GMO legislation, with the precautionary principle and transparency requirements as its central pillars, continue to be applied to the new GMOs. New GMOs must continue to be regulated in the same manner as old GMOs. Any other outcome from the political and scientific discussions currently underway would seriously undermine our own businesses, as well as the businesses of many farmers and seed, feed, and food producers, especially in the highly successful organic sector.
Yeah, thanks. I think if you see the companies, the retailers that have signed, that is an impressive group. And we are going to collect more signatories. Hopefully, we will get some in Portugal as well. We have been very much focused on the countries where we are organized, and that is Germany and Austria. But it is this retailers resolution is open for hopefully retailers all over Europe. Important for us was that we really use the term deregulation, not adapting, and that we use the term new GMOs. At first, the retailers, I think they weren't aware what is going on, and that we are dealing with a new wave of GMOs. So therefore, there has been a lot of discussions about that. That new breeding techniques is a misleading term. You can find the resolution on a link I have sent. Next and last slide, please.
Heike, you have 1 minute, please. 1 minute.
Yes, I'm nearly ready. That are my contact details, and so if you have an idea to reach Portuguese retailers, please let me know and contact me. Many thanks.
Thank you so much, Heike. Such a powerful presentation and very important insights into the discussion over regulation. I think we have a question for you from Danielle Sobral. And the question is, if you cannot detect at least some CRISPR modified organisms, wouldn't it cause problems for verification in the future?
The answer is that the alterations are known, at least from the developers. So therefore, if there is an applicant for an authorization here in the EU, the developer has to enclose the alteration. If the alterations are known, then detection methods are possible, or detection is possible, and detection methods can be developed. So that is as well a very misleading information to say that new GMOs are not detectable. They are patented, and the seed developers, or that ones who market new GMOs, they have intellectual property rights, and to protect their intellectual properties, they need detection methods.
Thank you. I think Diederik wants to add some information,
Yeah, just a little bit. This is just the same situation as we had with the old GM techniques, with the old GMO products. It was also said that you couldn't detect them, but they can be detected if we know what the modification is. That does imply that if we don't know that there has been a modification, we may not detect it. That is only natural, I would say. But it means that it's not useful to try and avoid detection for industry, because they want to make a profit with GMO products. So as soon as they sell something and want to earn profit with it, they'll have to say that it is modified, and then it falls under the legislation, and it has to be monitored, and they have to say what has been modified, and then it is detectable. But it does mean that certain GMOs may go undetected if they are developed not for the purpose of making a profit, but for another purpose that is kept secretive. For instance, for the military. This is a real problem, and it has always been. It's not new for the new techniques. It was also a problem with the old GM techniques.
Thank you, Diederik. Thank you for the awareness. Heike?
I would like to add something. We have a report from the responsible authorities, the European Network of GMO Laboratories, from 2019. And this report states that it's complicated to detect new GMOs and research is needed. What has happened afterwards was nothing. So therefore, I think it's a completely underfounded field of research, and that the EU Commission should have started research on detection methods, but that has never happened. So therefore, a group of companies, retailers, NGOs like Greenpeace has started research on a detection method for the cebus canola, this herbicide-resistant crop, and they have developed a detection method, privately financed, and it is possible to detect this first ever marketed new GMO crop. So therefore, I think industry and commission and all who are in favor of a deregulation of new GMOs like to spread these stories, because their claim is no detection, no regulation, but we try to counter this claim, and it can't be countered.
Quite true, Heike. The Commission has just not done its work. We've had these new techniques for about 10 years now, and the Commission in that time, instead of hesitating and thinking and doubting all the time about whether it should be regulated, they should have done their homework and developed detection techniques for them, because it can be done for any genetic modification that you can think up. A detection method can be developed, but they need to do it. It happened for the old GMO products. It must happen for the new GMO products.
Yes.
I think that maybe this is related with another question that was made by Eva from Ecologistas en Acción. She questions, nevertheless, hasn't existed a campaign pointing to that side. Why? I would like to ask Eva, could she clarify what does she mean by the side pointing to that side? Is it related with this discussion over the detection of genetic modified alterations? So I think what she's asking is, like, besides the pressure that we need to do over regulators, shouldn't we be also targeting universities and scientists to rethink and reshape the way they conduct science and conclude about science? Heike?
Yes, what I find interesting in the case of CRISPR-Cas, this technique has been developed from scientists at universities. Universities have been involved from the very beginning, and all these universities involved have patents on the techniques and exclusive contracts with companies. So therefore, it is a very close connection between universities, scientists, and big agribusiness. For example, one of the inventors of CRISPR-Cas, Emmanuel Charpentier, has set up a startup and an exclusive contract for agriculture applications with Bayer. The other major player, Corteva, formerly known as DuPont Pioneer, and now the agriculture sector of this company, they have a close relationship and contracts with Jennifer, I think it's her name, Doudna, the other inventor of CRISPR-Cas. So I think that is why we have the situation that we have, that we don't have so many scientists on our side with critical questions or critical approach, because there is such a mixture of science and business interests.
Thank you. Nina and Diederik, but Nina first, sorry. Nina wanted to talk to this.
I agree very much with what Heike just said. It is deliberate from the EU and at national level often as well to mix public and private interests in research by basically forcing academics and researchers to apply for public funding together with industry. And so on the one hand, you have academics that use simply these techniques for fundamental research and apparently very useful. This has nothing to do with then bringing organisms into nature or into agriculture. But these researchers don't often, with a few exceptions, like some of the members of ENSER, very often don't critique the behavior and the lobbying done by the part of the research institutes that are developing biotech products, you know, with partly public or private funding, and that are actually promoting patents and deregulation. So there is very little, the critique, if it is there, it stays very much indoors. It can really damage your career if you are too outspoken. And there is simply too few people really involved in developing the techniques or working with the techniques that at the same time can also and also want to warn for risks and for you know, have some reflection on the political side of, you know, what kind of world, what kind of agriculture do you create with the application of these techniques? You know, what should be the conditions? You know, what are who is actually stands to benefit? I mean, these are very relevant questions, but yeah, these are these kind of debates between academics are hardly ever happening. They're two completely divided worlds, it seems.
Thank you, Nina. Diederik?
Yes, this is, of course, one of the reasons why ENSER exists. What we do, as Lanka said in the beginning, is we promote independent science for the protection of the environment and human health against negative impacts of new technologies. We promote critical science. I could say informally, for short, what we try to do is reduce the influence of industry on science. We want to get science pure. We want to stimulate honest, straightforward, open science. So we also hold conferences and workshops on scientific topics. You can find quite a few of them on our website, recordings and reports, in which we address other scientists. And we also join scientific meetings of all sorts of bodies in Europe, where we discuss these topics like GM with other scientists. And we point out that open, critical, independent science gets results that are different from those of scientists that are paid by industry. But we're not very big yet. I hope to get bigger.
Thank you, Diederik.